Hi, I'm Lauren and welcome to my craft room. I'm so excited to have you back for our next Lawn Fawn fan video hop. We are featuring summer products just released from Lawn Fawn, and it's an internationally sponsored hop. So exciting. So make sure you like, leave a comment, and hit subscribe to any new to you channels to win a $25 gift certificate to Not Too Shabby. So I have an interactive card for you today. It was not an easy card to make, I will admit. It took me a lot of trial and error, and there were a lot of bumps and glitches along the way, and I will talk about that as I go through my process. But what I did learn, I think it will make it easier for you to reproduce this type of interactive part of the card. I have a pull tab that also features kind of a double slider effect in it. So it wasn't that I don't like how it turned out, but there are a few things that I want to change. I still think it's cute and I love it and I'm excited about it, obviously, so I'll share it with you. But I will point out some things that I think you could do this better. So follow along and experience this journey with me. I started off by stamping and coloring all of the images that I am going to use in this card. I do add a couple more at the end because I feel like it needs a little more, and we'll talk about that later, but this is all of the different stamp sets that I used to make the images for this card. I used quite a bunch, as you can tell. I just went through my stash looking for certain things that I wanted to use. So part of my background is using that puffy cloud die. I die cut it first with that puffy cloud backdrop and then use the large slimline to cut out the individual clouds. And I also use that to create my hill and water along with simple stitched hillside and simple stitch waves. I'm using Tim Holtz Distress Oxide in Broken China to color my water. This is my favorite color for water. I think it looks really great over already blue cardstock as well. I'm also going to come onto the edge with Faded Jeans just to make it a little darker on the edge to create more dimension. And then I'll bring back that Broken China and smooth it all out. I'm using just a coffee filter to make sure I don't have fingerprints or smear anything on to that water piece. Now I want to create the look of seaweed, so I'm going to use these stencils. First I'm doing the stem. Is that what you would call seaweed? Does seaweed have stems? Anyway, I'm using the stem portion first, and then I'm going to go over with the leaves part, and I'm using Cracked Pistachio Distress Oxide to create this look. What's really neat about these stencils is that there are engraved lines to where the stems of the branches, or the seaweed in this case, are located, so it helps with lining it up. And I'm just using some Scotch tape from Target to hold my stencil in place on my paper. And as you can see, when I pull the stencil off, I get that look of seaweed. Now this part you're gonna be like, wait, where did this blue with this line in it and distressing come from? This is the part of the card that I messed up. So I salvaged what I could from originally making this card, and that included this puffy cloud top part of my card. So I'm just showing you that I am overlapping and gluing the different pieces, and I threw in some of that shimmery cardstock in there, and that I cut out the insert for where the pull tab's going to be. I just wanted to show you that, even though it was from my first mistake of a card, just so you understood how I put it together. Next, I'm going to work on the hillside. I'm using the different grass stencils, and I'm using Mowed Lawn and Cracked Pistachio to create some dimension and how to just two-tone looking grass. I use my water piece to determine where that grass is going to go. And as I'm starting to overlap and put my background together, I wanted to use some frayed burlap distress oxide just to add a little bit to that hillside. So now I need to work on putting in my sliding pieces. So I'm figuring out where exactly this narwhal is going to go in the water. And I'm lining up my little slider piece, and I'm gonna die cut that through the brown and blue cardstock because the narwhal is gonna slide up from the water to give his present to his little rhino friend. So I'm lining everything up. And once I have that cut, I need to line up where my unicorn is gonna come down from the clouds, from heaven above, to give his or her piece of cake to the rhino. So I'm lining that up, and I want to make sure that these two cutouts for where the sliding pieces are going to go are lined up with that pull tab opening. And I die cut that pull tab opening on the blue cardstock because that's where I'd already placed it on my cloudy part. So I had to make sure that it lined up to salvage that cloud piece. So once I have it where I want it, I run it through the die cut. And I also run the pull tab part that actually you would hear your images to. And what I did is I ran it through the die cut, and I didn't go all the way to the end. I just wanted to start those lines, and then I trimmed the rest of it to create this long pull tab piece. Now to make the slider, I'm using just a scrap piece of paper that is slightly smaller than the width or the height of that top pull tab opening. And I'm creating this just like you would for the slider die. I used a plastic bag and wrapped it around, and I'm using really strong sticky tape on the edges of that white piece, as well as to hold that plastic in place. I cut another one of those little toast pieces from the from the sliding die, and I'm going to trim that down so that way it will glue to the plastic bag to create the sliding effect, the double slider. So on one side of my double slider will be that little toast piece, and the other side is going to be the pull tab. So this way, when you pull the tab, the narwhal will come up from the water, and then the double slider or reverse slider is going to bring down the unicorn. So now that I have that in place, I'm going to use those little folded pieces to help keep my pull tab in place from moving. This will help when you're pulling the pull tab up to make sure that that piece stays in place. And I used a really thick cardstock because this is a really long piece and I want it to go in and out of the card easily. And this is probably where I would say problem number one is that you need to use a really sturdy piece because sliding it back in can be difficult because it is such a long piece. And you'll see me kind of struggle with that as I make this card. I even need to trim it down a little to make sure that it goes through easily through these two little pieces I'm gluing to the back of my background. I made sure to space them out to make sure that my pull tab had as much freedom to move as it could. And I'm also using some strong sticky tape to adhere my pull tab to the other side of that plastic slider. So as you can see, as I pull it, they both move in opposite directions. So now that the mechanism is done, I'm going to start gluing my card together. I'm gluing my hill onto that blue background, and I'm going to glue my narwhal onto that first little toast piece on the bottom. I'm using my water to help as a guideline and then a pencil to know where I need to trim my little toast piece to make sure no white shows. What I didn't think about was that I couldn't trim the bottom part of it, and a little bit of the white will show at the end. I didn't do anything about it, but I could probably color in some green or blue like the water to hide that before I send it out to someone. Now for the unicorn, I'm using those clouds and writing on that top toast piece of where my unicorn is going to go. I wished I would have put her a little bit lower because I think her unicorn horn doesn't show enough in the whole, if you haven't picked it up yet, the whole point of this card is for all of my critters to have horns, but it's okay. It is what it is at this point. I'd already didn't like the first attempt, so now I'm sticking with it this time. Now I'm using pop-up foam tape to put my water on for the bottom of my card, and I'm excited that my mechanism works. It's still having trouble going back down, but it does work, and that makes me happy. Now I'm figuring out where I want to put the rainbow. I decide to put it to the left and have it go off the card, so it's just a little bit of a touch of the rainbow. And the coral I am adding to the bottom of the card. I just wanted a little more color in my ocean and give it more to look at other than just blue and seaweed, since my narwhal is hiding behind the water. Now I'm gluing on my rhino, and at this point I really should have made sure that my narwhal and my unicorn were out, because there is a little bit of trouble with the placement of the rhino when the unicorn comes down, which you'll see when I test the slider again, but it's okay. The placement is fine, and if and when I make this card again, I'll make sure to have my images all showing when I put in the center portion of the card. So now I trimmed off the rest of the pull tab and I applied a lot of foam tape, and I'm gonna adhere this to my card base. I'm using a sturdy white cardstock, and as you can see there, I just tried to pull it out and my unicorn hits my poor little rhino. But I glue on some sparkly cardstock to the top of my pull tab, and it's fine. Doesn't ruin the card. It does stick out a little bit, and I tried fidgeting to see if maybe I could move it, but it was too late. They were stuck. Now that everything is glued down, I realized I never put any sparkle on my card, so I'm using some liquid stardust with my water spritzer and sprinkling it all over the card. And then I'm going to use some liquid stardust without water on its own onto the ocean part. It's still not enough, so I am putting some water, spritzed water on it and drying it off. Now it looks more watery to me and I'm happy with it. Now, funny story. I was looking for the perfect sentiment for this card, and I thought, hope your birthday is on point was perfect because they all have horns, they all have a little point, right? The unicorn, rhino, and narwhal. And I really thought I had this stamp set. Like, I made this card with these critters knowing I was going to use this. And I go to look for it and I can't find it. Turns out I don't own it. So I drove to my favorite stamp store, Stamp Fever, on a lunch break. It is about a half an hour away from where I work, but I drove over and I picked it up and I was like, I need this sentiment. Everything rides on this sentiment for me. So I found a piece of blue scrap paper, embossed it in some white powder, and I'm gonna trim right up to the edge of the words to put it into the ocean part of my card. So I'm very thankful that Linda responded to my Instagram message basically begging if she had this stamp set, and she did. And so thank you, Linda from Stamp Fever. So I trimmed down the words, but I'm just using my big scissors to trim down the sides. It doesn't have to be perfect because it is small. And I'm gonna go ahead and adhere these directly onto the water. I figured this card's already thick enough, I'm not gonna pop up my sentiment. So using my grid, I'm trying to find the center of my card, and I'm gonna glue these both down. I like that it blends in with the water and just gives the water more to look at. So just like I was having trouble with my open water, my sky looked so plain. So I quickly colored the sun and a couple clouds from all the clouds just to add a little bit more to my sky. It looked so boring and empty, and I think it helped a lot. I had those overlap off the edge and I trimmed those down. And that, I'm finally happy and satisfied with my card. Like I said, I wish that they weren't overlapping so much, my critters, but you know, it still works. And my mechanism is getting easier to move the more I use it. So I think as I move the card more, it will get better. But thank you for joining me today on this adventure. Please check out my description to find the next hopper on this hop. And don't forget to leave a comment. Bye!